all of them are coming back. And the military bases that you see here is telling you that if you don't behave, we are going to use force. Sometimes I wish, and I'm saying this seriously, that we too had a nuclear weapon, because that is what Europe and America understands.
Hello everybody, welcome once again to AfriPost. I believe wherever you're watching us from, you're doing great. Now, Africa is a continent that is continuously under siege of the Western nations. These countries have really used Africa as a battleground and a place where they can come and really make their wars, cause division, and plunder its resources. This has really led to the fall of Africa in terms of failing to really develop as it should be. Because if you look at it, Africa is the only continent with almost every natural resource. And therefore, if Africa could stand by itself and develop its own resources into finished products, then it can really be a continent that cannot compete with any, because it will really be higher. That is why those who have called for change of the monetary system in Africa to have a single currency and also have a single military base and power have really faced difficulties. People like Muammar Gaddafi did not really find it easy. But the main question here is, should Africa have its own military power? Should Africa build its nuclear resources? I want us to watch what PLO Lumumba is saying here in this video, and then let's react to it after the video. Kindly watch.
Thank you very much. Let me thank those who have spoken before me and remind us that interference in Africa started with slavery. When slavery had lost its value, it graduated into colonization. And that is the context in which Berlin must be seen, when the European powers sat in Berlin and divided the continent of Africa into spheres of influence. When colonization had lost its luster, through a combination of certain realities and agitation from the continent, we regained our independence. But as John Henry Clark, that great African-American, said, we regained independence by mimicking European governance systems. And he rightly says, no African country will ever succeed on the basis of those systems. After that, the neo-colonial project was instituted. And all of us will remember Kwame Nkrumah's book, Neo-Colonialism, the Last Stage of Imperialism. And he there says the most dangerous. We are now in a neo-colonial stage when the European powers are at their most diabolical, when the Americans are at their most diabolical. And it's not lost on me that they'll be meeting in Hiroshima next week as the G7. And how do they interfere? They interfere militarily. They ensure that you in the military are trained in Sandhurst, are trained in West Point, so they affect your mind. They interfere diplomatically, sometimes through gunboat diplomacy. And that is why you see sometimes your typical European ambassador treats our heads of states in a condescending manner. They interfere through institutions such as the IMF and the World Bank. They interfere by ensuring that our economic infrastructure is beholden to theirs through dollarization. They interfere through education. They interfere by influencing our processes, by lending us advisors who tell us what to do. The neo-colonial project is alive and well, and it is at its most dangerous, and we Africans must smell the coffee. If we don't, they are going to continue to interfere. How else do they interfere? Through NGOs, Danida, CEDA, UK Aid, USAID. These are Trojan horses that are introduced into our countries for the purpose of influencing our processes. and they infiltrate our institutions. Right now, if you look at the African Development Bank, look at the shareholding. It's Americans, it's Germans, it's Japanese, it's the French. And the Europeans have done their bit. They also interfere through post-colonial institutions, the Commonwealth of independent nations. They are not sovereign states, former French-speaking nations. These are the instruments that they interfere through. And how do we then deal with this situation? We Africans must now begin to recognize, and this was recognized as early as 1963, and the chair of the commission is here. They'll be celebrating 60 years in Addis Ababa, Ethiopia. And 60 years ago, on the 24th day of May, Kwame Nkrumah warned us. He said, if we are not united, they are going to interfere with us militarily. They are going to interfere with our economy. They are going to interfere with our agriculture. They are going to interfere with our health. Our duty, and I hope that when African heads of states and government meet in Addis next week, it will not be another jamboree at which pro forma speeches are read. I hope it will be an occasion to give meaning to Africa Agenda 2063. I hope it will be an occasion to give meaning to Africa Continental Free Trade Area. I hope it will be an occasion to revitalize the Malabo Declaration, the Maputo Declaration, the Yamoussoukro Declaration. In other words, we Africans, as I conclude, we Africans must stop operating in silos. Rwanda alone will not confront them. Burundi alone will not confront them. But if we go through the regional bodies and ultimately the African Union, we may indeed succeed in putting away this bulwark. And remember, it is no longer just Europe. There is a new scramble for Africa. The Chinese are here. The Turks are here. The Qataris are here. All of them are coming back. And the military bases that you see here is telling you that if you don't behave, we are going to use force. Sometimes I wish, and I'm saying this seriously, that we too had a nuclear weapon, because that is what Europe and America understands. Thank you. When we talk the way we do, we are not blaming anybody. The impact of European and American and Russian and Chinese interference is a raw wound. It is not something that is in the past. It is something that is happening as we speak. And therefore, when we speak to it, we are speaking to it to warn ourselves of the reality. When we speak about the Danidas and the NGOs, these are bodies whose raison d'etre is to ensure that we remain in a perpetual state of begging. That is what we are doing to warn ourselves. And we are not for 1 minute saying that we will shut ourselves out from the rest of the world. What we are saying is that we must define how we engage with the whole world. And we are saying that as individual countries, we are weak, and the rest of the world wants to operate and to deal with us in our weak state. The United States of America are dealing with Rwanda on second-hand clothing. Rwanda cannot resist them. Burundi cannot. Kenya cannot. Uganda cannot. But if we are East Africa with a population of 300 million, we can. If we are SADC, we can. If we are ECOWAS, we can. So this is what we are saying. And we are saying further that going forward, we must also recognize our internal weaknesses. And what is our weaknesses? Chinua Achebe said it very well. The problem of Africa is simply and squarely one of political leadership. The rank of many political leaders in Africa are thieves. Let's call them by their name. They are thieves. They are individuals who are not interested in the interest of this country. And as long as we continue electing such individuals into positions of power across Africa, they are going to be manipulated. What then is the responsibility of the citizenry? The responsibility of the citizenry is to make demands. The chairman here, I hope he has received the several letters that I have written to him. I've written several letters to his organization talking about the role of the African Union in peacemaking. I wrote to the chairman only last week about the situation in Sudan, saying we must solve our own problems. And I want to see a crusading African Union, so that it's not the Americans and the Saudi Arabians who are summoning them to Jeddah. It should be in Addis Ababa. In a nutshell, Joe, what I'm saying is that we have a responsibility to ourselves, both at the leadership level and at levels of the civic society. We must be engaged in a positive manner, and we must keep on shouting without being diplomatic, because diplomacy is lulling us into a false sense of security. And lastly, I want to say this. When foreign powers come, we must always be reminded of these goodies that they bring to us. It used to be said of the Trojan War that even when the Greeks bear a gift, they do not mean well. They never mean well. And the sooner we say it, recognizing the external threat, recognizing the domestic weaknesses, the safer we are. Right now, as I conclude, there is a group of experts going around East Africa, collecting views about the constitution of East Africa. I've just written to them this morning. They are leaving Kenya. If you ask 10 Kenyans, possibly only one knows they're in Kenya. Then they will be going to Burundi. If you ask your typical African about Africa Agenda 2063 out of 10, if 2 know about Africa Agenda 2063, you'll be lucky. If you ask them about the Africa Continental Free Trade Area 10, if 2 know, you'll be lucky. In other words, we are not doing well. And I'm going to be blunt at these functions. If you ask the chair of the African Union who funds the African Union, possibly 60% of the budget is externally funded. He who pays the piper calls the tune. That is the reality of the world. We must begin to pay for our own things in order to be understood and to be respected. Thank you.
Now, if you listen to PLO Lumumba, you'd really feel like Africa has an opportunity to really build itself and make itself great, because the manner in which Western countries are really dealing with it, it's condescending in a way. That is why sometimes when China comes to Africa, we as Africans really embrace them, because their plan for Africa is great. They have never come to really direct us on how we should engage with other people. They have not come to tell us that we should not have this culture. Look at how America comes to Africa. They come to us and tell us that they're the champions of human rights, that there is a way through which we should adopt some of their societal behaviors, like let's say same-sex marriage, and then call it as our own, because in Africa that is not acceptable. There are certain things that are totally not acceptable. But if you look at it, you'll note that European Union and United States are acting as the bullies of the world, and they want Africa to really be subject to their own desires and decisions. People have said that lectures that United States is bringing in Africa should stop. That which is coming from European Union should also stop. And Africa should rise in its own space. That is why you'd note that most African countries right now are looking to the east. They are going to Russia, because Russia is respectful to Africa. China is respectful to Africa. They are coming as partners. They want to talk as brothers, not as big boys or even as bullies for that matter. And therefore, I tend to agree with the opinion of PLO Lumumba that nuclear weapons must be in the table. And that is what Africa should also work towards achieving. Because without achieving that, Africa will continue to be laughed at. And there should reach a point where we say that the military bases of Western countries in our continent should be scrapped off and they should not be here, because what are they doing in Africa? What are US soldiers doing in Africa? What are European soldiers doing in Africa? They should not be here. French soldiers taking over everywhere. They are coming in a way that they want to create peace, yet these divisions that are happening and the conflicts have been funded by their own coffers. So we should really call for Africa to develop itself and have a situation whereby it can have and weapons that can help it protect itself against any unruly invasion that can come from bullies like United States and even France. That is it from me. I don't know what you think about this topic. Please tell us your opinion down in the comment section. Like this video, and if you're watching us for the first time, don't forget to subscribe to this channel, and let's meet in our next video. Goodbye, and may the good Lord bless you. Goodbye.